Because Photoshop is so many things to so many different people, it has a tremendous number of options. For example, look at the number of panels that are showing by default, and this is not nearly all of them. Now, Photoshop does display panels a bit differently based on screen resolution, so you might be seeing a slightly different configuration by default. If your panel layout is different, or if you've rearranged all of your panels, then you might want to choose Essentials from the list and then choose Reset Essentials so that we're all starting at the same place. Now, to see a whole list view of all of the panels, we can go under the Window menu, and the ones with the check marks are the ones that are on top of any stacked or nested panels. For example, the Color panel has a check and it is on top of this nesting of panels. Swatches is below it, but if I were to choose Swatches from this list, then it would have the check mark and it would be moved to the top. If you were to select a panel, such as the Character panel, well, it will appear within the second column of panels, and some panels are automatically nested with others, like the Character and the Paragraph panel. We can use these two chevrons in order to collapse this. And if we want to expand the entire column, we can use the chevron at the top. Alright, let's click that again in order to hide it. If we want to see the icon plus the name of the panel, we can drag out on the edge of the panel. Or if we're happy with just seeing the icon, we can go ahead and drag that back. Now, in order to rearrange a panel within a group, we just need to click on the tab for the panel and then we can drag it left or right. In order to reorder it, if I want to move a panel from one group to another, then we can select that panel and drag and drop it. When we see the other nesting of panels with a blue highlight all the way around it, well then, I know that when I release my cursor, it will drop that into that grouping. If I want to create a new grouping, then I can select a panel and drag it in between two groups. I can drop it and it will create its own group. I can double-click on the name of any panel in order to minimize that panel, and I can click it again in order to expand it. If we need to, we can add more columns. I can drag this over to the left of that second column. When I see the blue vertical line, I can release my cursor, and now we have a third column of panels. We can also undock our panels by just dragging them away from the others. Now they're floating, and this can be very handy if you want to drag them, for example, to a secondary monitor. You can even dock panels to the toolbar on the left-hand side of the screen. Now, to close a panel, we can right-click or control-click on Mac and close a panel. We can also right-click or control-click on an entire group of panels and choose to close the entire tab group. And if we want to temporarily hide our panels, we can just tap the Tab key. Now that will hide the tools and the panels. Tapping Tab again will bring them back. If we want the tools to remain visible and only hide the panels, then we'll add the Shift key. So Shift Tab will hide, Shift Tab again will bring them back. Alright, I'm going to move to Bridge and open up this document because I want to point out that one of the panels is a bit different, and that's the Properties panel. Now it's going to change its contents based on the tool and the layer that's selected, very similar to the contextual taskbar. For example, when we look at the Layers panel, we have a certain number of options in the Properties panel. When I convert this background into a layer, then we'll see different options. Similarly, if we add type or a shape layer, we'll get different options in the Properties panel based on that tool or that layer being selected. Now, as you become more experienced in Photoshop, you'll find that you'll use different groups of panels for performing different tasks. And it might be helpful to customize the way that your panels are laid out and save them. If you want to look at some other ways that panels are laid out, we can use the menu here. For example, if you were doing graphic and web work, well, then it might be handy to show all of your type and library panels. Likewise, if you're doing photography, it might be helpful to have access to the histogram and to your adjustment layers. For now, I'm going to choose Core Tools, and then I'm going to hide or close my adjustments as well as my history so that all I have are my properties and my layers. If I wanted to save this as a workspace, we could click on the icon and choose New Workspace. I'll call this JK Simple. And I only want to save the panels for now, so I'll leave these unchecked. Choose Save. And now, if I select a different layout, for example, painting, and then I want to quickly return to my set of panels, I can just select that from the list. Alright, for now, so that we're all working with the same setup, I will return to Essentials, and then I'll choose to reset the Essentials. However, throughout this course, I'm going to be hiding many of the panels so that we can focus on the ones that are more relevant to the features that we are discussing. Alright, I'll use Command or Control W to close this file, and I don't need to save it. Excellent! That's how easy it is to customize the panels that you use most often in Photoshop. In addition to using different panels, you'll also spend a lot of time in Photoshop switching tools. Now, almost every tool has a keyboard shortcut. For example, the Move tool has a keyboard shortcut of V, and the Marquee tool has a keyboard shortcut of M. So if I tap the V key, then I'll select the Move tool, and if I tap the M key, I'll select the Marquee tool. Almost all the tools also have nested tools. So when you click and hold on a tool, you can see all of the nested tools and the keyboard shortcuts. For example, the L key is assigned not only to the Selection Brush tool, but also the Lasso tool, the Polygonal Lasso tool, and the Magnetic Lasso tool. So how do you select the different tools? Well, certainly we can choose them from the flyout here, or we can hold down the Shift key, and then tap the L key in order to cycle through all of the tools that have the L key assigned as the keyboard shortcut. Now, you may see a tooltip when you hover your cursor on top of a tool, but in a previous version I disabled that by going to the Photoshop menu and then choosing either Settings or Preferences depending on what operating system you're on. On Windows, it would be under the Edit menu and then selecting Tools, and I disabled both the Rich Tooltips and the regular tooltips. Okay, if you don't like the default order of the tools, or if you want to hide some of the tools that you don't use very often, you can customize the toolbar. We can either choose the Edit menu and then scroll down and choose Toolbar, or we can click on the three dots in the toolbar, hold down our cursor, and then choose Edit Toolbar. If we want to split out nested tools, we can simply drag and drop them. So now we can see that the rectangular Marquee tool and the elliptical Marquee tool each have their own place or position on the toolbar, and you don't have to click and hold because they are no longer nested. We can also remix or rearrange our different tools. For example, if I wanted to move the Lasso tool up with the Marquee tool, I could do so. Alright, for now, I'll go ahead and put that back. We can also remove tools that we don't use very often. I can just drag a tool over here to the right to the extra tools, and then they'll no longer be visible when we select our tool. We can, however, always access them by clicking on the three dots. In addition, we can change the keyboard shortcut for any of the tools that we want. So for example, if I wanted the rectangular Marquee tool and the elliptical Marquee tool to have different keyboard shortcuts, well, then I could scroll down and look for a tool that I don't use very often. Let's say I don't use the eraser tool. Its keyboard shortcut is E, so I'd scroll back up, click on the M, and instead enter E. I could even remove the E from all of the other tools that have it, so that I would be assured that every time I tap E, I would get the elliptical Marquee tool. But for now, I'll go ahead and leave them on. After spending time setting up your own custom tools, you can save these custom sets by choosing Save Preset, then just give it a name and save it in the default location. However, for this course, I'm gonna choose to restore the defaults just in case someone has skipped this video. A few additional tool options. Tools by default are in a single column, but we can click on the double chevron here in order to see a two-column view. In addition, we can float the toolbar. If I click on the grabber handle and just drag it away from the edge, it's now floating. I can dock it over here with the other tools or drag it to a secondary monitor. And finally, if tools aren't behaving like you think they should, you can always right-click or control-click on Mac on the icon for the tool in the options bar and choose to reset the tool or reset all tools. This only changes the options in the options bar for the tool. It won't actually reset the position of the tools or any shortcuts that you've changed. So as you can see, the tool layout in Photoshop is very flexible, and don't worry about learning the shortcuts to all the tools right away. You'll learn the ones that you need to know, and soon enough, it'll be second nature just to use the keyboard shortcut to select the tool much more quickly and efficiently in Photoshop.